Hello and welcome to Calm the Farm podcast, where pharmacy business meets legal wisdom, minus the headache. In each episode, we share practical legal tips and real-life examples to help you run your pharmacy with confidence. I'm your host, Sarah Stoddart. Thanks very much for joining us. This episode today is part 2 of our two-part series on Privacy Act obligations. So last week we spoke about the legislation as it currently stands and some pitfalls. Today we're going to talk about what you can actually do to reduce the impacts of those risks and pitfalls and to get compliant. Tune in and let's go. So what steps can you take to reduce the likelihood of the recent changes on your pharmacy business and the impacting your pharmacy business, and to make sure you're not falling into the pitfalls we've just discussed? Well, here are 5 steps you can take, and this is a bit of a health check that I've developed. Step 1, audit what you collect. This step involves considering what data you're collecting, how and why. So think about what data are we getting from our patients, how are we getting that, are they filling in a form, are they doing it online, so on and so forth, and why. Why are we collecting that information? You then need to think about, can the amount of data we are collecting be minimised or reduced? The best way to go about this is to go through a checklist or forms or whatever it is that you use to collect data. Consider each and every piece of data that you collect, starting with name, address, date of birth, etc. And ask yourself, how is this used in the business and is it really needed? If you don't need to know your patient's marital status, why are you asking for it? Step 2 is to minimise what you collect. So look at your checklist forms, etc. Update them to make sure they're up to date with the current legislation, and then check to ensure that you're only collecting what you need. Scrap everything else. Step 3 is to communicate. Review and amend your privacy policy to ensure it's transparent and clearly sets out how you use or disclose data, including the use of AI and how AI is used. What's important here is it's not just about having a privacy policy, it's about having the right one. Your privacy policy needs to be up to date and it needs to reflect how you actually operate, not your pharmacist friend that's operating in a different state entirely. You then need to ensure that your policy is obviously compliant with the legislation, and there's people like myself who can assist with that. And you also need to train your team. This is absolutely critical and is key in the step of communication. Your team need to know how you deal with information under the Act. They also need to understand privacy obligations in general and how to consistently be following best practice and the law when handling personal information. This is something that also needs to be front of mind when inducting new staff members and having staff meetings when there has been changes to legislation. Because you might have a group of staff at the moment who have been with you for some time, which is fantastic, but are they aware of the changes that came in since June 2025? Step 4 is secure. So you need to improve your data security to prevent breaches and unauthorised access of information. If you're storing physical documents, where are they stored? Who has access to those documents? And if you're storing electronic documents or information, where is it stored? Who has access to it and where is it visible? You need to review your data retention and deletion practices. So you shouldn't be storing unnecessary patient information for longer than is required, and certainly not information that's also not even required for the purposes of which you work with that patient. So if you need help understanding the timeframes and requirements as to how long you should hold on to information, please speak to your lawyer. But it is important in this step to make sure the information you are collecting, including information, of course, that is, for your primary purpose, which you need to collect, and that's fair enough, but we need to be making sure that information is securely stored. Step 5, respond. Have a plan in place for when things go wrong. This is known as a data breach response plan, and every business needs to have one. You need to know how you're going to respond when a data breach occurs. Practice what happens if there is a breach. So mock up a scenario. How will you respond? What gaps exist in your response plan and what processes need to be tightened? You should also be conducting regular privacy impact assessments. This involves evaluating the potential risks associated with systems and software you use, particularly those which involve sensitive health or other personal information. So if you're using particular software in your business, assess that software and think about what risk associated with that software in terms of the data that is stored within it. You should also ask yourself whether you know who is responsible for a data breach which occurs on software licensed to you by a third party. So if you're using third-party software, and I dare say everyone is in the pharmacy industry, you need to find out what would happen if there was a data breach on the software entity's systems. So what would happen if their system had a breach or got attacked? How would that impact on your business, and how would your patient's data be protected? If you don't know the answer to that question, you need to find out and mitigate the risks accordingly. So that's your 5-step health plan, but you might have a few thoughts in your head, and I'm going to preempt those thoughts, call them out as myths, and bust them for you. So firstly, the first myth: my staff already know what to do. If they absolutely well and truly know what to do, that is fantastic. But I dare say they don't. It may be that they are new in the business. It may be that things have got a bit lax over time. It may be that they know how the privacy policy was this time last year, but not since these changes were implemented. So I would encourage you to go back and test your team around this information, and I think you'll find that they probably don't know what to do, and that is an opportunity to train and communicate. It's okay to text a patient information if they've asked. This is a tricky one because it depends who has asked and how they've asked. So if a patient has given you information and not their mobile number, or if they've ticked a box and said they don't want to receive SMS information, and then when they're in store they ask you to just send you something through via text, then arguably there isn't consent there. So this comes back to thinking about how you record consent, which should be express consent, and then where that information is stored so that you can access it quickly. So it might be okay to text the patient, but you need to check what consent has been given and when and if anything else is required. We've got a privacy policy, we're fine. I've heard this one more times than I can count. That's great if you have a privacy policy, but as I've mentioned, unless it is current and suited to your business and meets the requirements of the legislation, it may as well not exist at all. So you need to think about whether or not your privacy policy is a good one for your business and up to date and current, or whether it needs to be reviewed. We're a small pharmacy. It doesn't affect us. Gone are the days when people could opt out of the privacy legislation as a result of their size. The amendments that were introduced in June 2025 relate to every single business, regardless of business type, revenue, staff numbers, etc. So each and every business in Australia is now subject to these requirements. And the final myth: nobody reads privacy policies anyway. Look, I think I agree with you. It's not exactly exciting reading. However, that's not going to get you out of trouble when there is a privacy breach. So even if it's not exciting reading and it's, you'd rather do something else and review your privacy policy, it is important to have it in place because of the long-term protection of your business, your reputation, and of course, your patients. Here's the truth. Privacy law is no longer something you can just set and forget. It's not about having a dusty policy at the bottom of your website or in your drawer and hoping that your staff know what to do. In 2025, privacy is part of patient care. It's part of how you build trust, run a compliant business, and show up as a professional. Getting it right doesn't have to be complicated, you just have to start. So, where to from here? Review, review, review. You need to review your privacy policy, you need to review what data you're collecting, and you need to review how you use, store, share, and protect data in your business. My message to you is this: take action. Start small, fix what matters, and protect what counts. Because protecting your patient information protects your reputation.